In this video, you are going to learn how to read data from a MySQL database. We're going to start learning the basics of SQL using a MySQL database. So we're going to learn how to do a select statement. My name is Armaz Kungfu. I run supersqa.com, where I help people learn QA automation and help people get into automation from a no-tech background or from a manual testing positions. And this is part of my software testing fundamentals course. It's a totally free course that I have on my website, which I would link in the description. If you want to get into software testing or grow in software testing, you can start by that free course. And there is a SQL section, a pretty big SQL section included in that course, but I am taking some of those tutorials and putting them here on YouTube, and it's going to be a playlist. It's going to be a series, so you're not just going to take one lecture, but you want to keep just going and learn as much as you can. Also, there are exercises, there are challenges. We're going to learn how to do something, then there are challenges. This is very much hands-on, so you can also download those challenges down in the description, all right? So we're going to learn SQL using two databases, World Database and an Employees Database. Those are totally free databases that are available to install and set up. The expectation for this lecture is you already have the data set up. If you don't have the data set up, I have videos on how to do that, and just check the description. There will be videos on how to install MySQL locally, totally free, and how to load some sample data so you can actually practice. If you want to learn how to use SQL, you need some data to be able to use SQL. All right, so let's jump right into it and start writing SQL. So when you're learning SQL, the first thing you learn is how to read, and the keyword for reading is select. So the keywords SQL is not case sensitive, so you can do select or you can do uppercase select, right? What I normally do is, I'll show you later, is I'll just write everything in lowercase and I'll have the tool workbench converted. We are using the client workbench to write all our code. So select star from, I'm just going to leave it as lowercase, from, let's say I want to read from this employees table, employees database, employees table. So in this database, in the employees database, there are several tables. There is this table section. You click on the drop down. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different tables. Each one contains different data. So what we're going to say is, we're going to say, okay, we want to read from employees schema or database. The word schema and database used interchangeably all the time. From that schema, we want to read the employees table. So once your pointer or your cursor is on that line, you have multiple ways to execute it. You can click on this or you can click on this. But if you have more lines, this will execute pretty much everything. But this would only execute the line that your cursor is currently active. So I'm going to use that all the time. Technically, I actually use the keyboard shortcut, but I'll talk about it in a little bit. All right. So basically, I clicked on that and it executed. When you execute the SQL, you get the results right here in this table format, because this is my SQL structured database, structured relational database. So you get all the columns. Down here, you see basically what actually happened. I believe I can clear this and run this query again, so you don't see stuff from previous when I was loading data and stuff. So here it shows you the query you run. Green means the query ran successfully. The response is basically how many rows we got, right? Even though there is a limit of 1,000, I don't know why we returned every row. I'm going to change it to 400 limit. I'm going to talk about it shortly. There you go. So 400 rows returned. We're going to talk about why there is a limit and things like that. So this is a very simple query. Let's say I want to run the salaries table. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to say select star from, what is the schema name? Employees dot, what is the table name? Salaries. All right. Then I'm going to run that. My cursor is there. I'm going to type that. Now I have a different set of data from a different table. The previous result has more columns. Even the column name are different. So this is how you would run queries, right? This is the most basic SQL query. Select star from, read from this schema, this table. Now, a lot of times you might see things when they don't specify the schema. So if I was to just copy this and bring it here, and if I don't say employees, this actually might error or it might not. Actually, this might not right now. it did error out saying table world.employees does not exist. But I never told it to do world. I just said employees, because right now world is selected. You can see it's bolded, so it knows to use the word schema. So if you want to run queries without specifying what the schema is, you first have to tell it what to use. So you're going to say use employees, right? Then you run that query first. I use the shortcut. So I do Alt Enter, Command Enter to run it. I believe it will be Control Enter on Windows. Or I can just run this. Now I told it to use that database. All of a sudden, the employees is bold, the world is not. Now if I run this query, then it would just work. So you need to tell it what database to work. That's just a little side note so you don't get confused, because you're going to see queries like this. But 99% of the time, I write my query like this: schema table, schema table. I like to be very, very specific. Okay. All right. So that's how we read data. Let's say I want to read data from a different table. So we already saw how to read data from the employees table, from salaries table. Let's do more example reading data from the world database. So when we look at the world database, the schema is world or database or schema. You can use those words interchangeably. Then we see the tables. There are 3 tables. There is the city, country, and country language table. Let's say I want to read from the country table. What I would do is I would say select star from, what's the schema, world, dot, what's the table, country, semicolon. So every statement in SQL is terminated by a semicolon. Okay, at the end of every statement is a semicolon. If I don't put a semicolon, for example, here, I'm going to get an error because it thinks this whole thing is one query. It's going to know where the query ends, where it sees the semicolon. So if I forget semicolon here, it's going to think this here all the way up to here is one query, but it doesn't make sense because there's a select in the middle of it. It's going to give me an error. So I have to terminate this statement with a semicolon. Now this becomes a valid query. So I'm going to run this. I'm saying read data from world.country. Okay. So once I do that, I get this country table has a lot of columns. You have code, you have name, continent, region, surface area, and a bunch of other things. One thing you can do in Workbench is you can pin it. So when you pin this, now this result set would be there. Even if I run another query, let's say I'm going to run the same query over again, now it opened a new tab for the result set, but the first result set is still there. If I run the employees table, now I have record from the employees table. I have data set from the employees table, but the previous one is still open because I pinned it. So I'm going to pin those two so I can go back and forth and look at what the column headings are, right? So at the very basic level, that's what you're going to do. Select star from schema and table. Now the star is telling us get every column that is available on that table. So when we look at select star world.country, we hit run, we get so many columns, right? When we do select star employees.employees, we get all the columns on that table. But maybe we don't need all that column. Maybe we just need the first name and the last name, right? So instead of star, we're going to actually give it the first name and the last name. So what we're going to do is we're going to select first name, comma, last name from employees.employees. Okay, now if I run that, now we only get the 2 columns. That is what you do. So you don't normally, especially in programming, when you're writing code and in your code you're running query, you don't normally put star. You specify exactly what you want because you don't want everything. It's rarely that you want every single thing, and that's just going to use up a lot of bandwidth, right? All that information has to come, all that information has to travel. So you're only going to get what you want, not everything. Okay, and plus if let's say you have the table like that and later on something happens and you change the location and everything, like the columns, then you don't have to worry about it if you want specific names. Okay, to look at another with examples of world with the country, the same thing, being able to specify the names. If we run the query, these are all the columns, right? So let's say maybe I just want to get the name, so I can right click here, copy name, copy field name, comma, and I say I want to get the name, the continent, and then let's say I want the population. right? Now I get this three columns, hit enter, and voila, we got name, continent, population, right? We can control exactly what we want. Now notice something, just a little side note. All the keywords, they're highlighted. I wish they used a brighter color. I'm sure it can be configured, but I'm pretty sure you can see it too. So yeah, use a different color for keywords, right? Some weird gray color, and then white. Then there's font for anything else, the table names, things like that. So here though, when I do name, after select, it used that color, that keyword, because name is a keyword in MySQL. So MySQL has tons of keywords, function names and keywords, and just there are tons of built-in keywords. So name happens to be one of them, but in this case, we're not using it as a keyword. It's actually a name of a column. So sometimes you get an error. Right now, we have no issues. Visually, it looks weird because the color is changed and it looks like it's a keyword, but it didn't cause any problem. The query did run. But sometimes there are some special keywords that would cause errors. So to tell MySQL that, hey, don't use it as a keyword, just use it as a normal name, you're going to put it inside of ticks. A tick is the key that happens right next to the number one is with a tilde. The first key on the first row, basically. That's it. It's a tick. So you put it in the tick, then MySQL knows that's not a keyword. In fact, it even give it a different color. Okay, that's just a little side note right there. So this is how you read data from databases at a basic level. To look at more examples, we can say select star from world.city. That city is another table, so we can do city semicolon and execute the query, and here we are with all the table from the city, all the data from the city. So we basically just run select statements. Now, when you look at the number of rows returned, okay, MySQL Workbench allows us to easily just set limits. That default limit is always going to limit it here. But if you were to run this in a command line, like using the CLI, you connect the database using the CLI, and you run select start from this table, you're going to get everything. And row tables, normally like production tables, they have millions and millions and millions of rows. Think about a database in Amazon. Think about a database in Facebook, right? How many rows they have? They have millions and billions of rows. So if you get all that data at once, basically things are going to crash. You don't want all that information, so you want to limit it. And in your application, you're not using Workbench. If you're using CLI, you're not using Workbench. So you don't have an automatic limit. Even in Workbench, you can say don't limit, and you can run the query. So if I have don't limit and I run this query, I don't know why this got hidden. If I run that query, we got, when we look at the total number of rows returned, we got 4,000 rows. So if I was to scroll here, there are 4,000. Let's look at the employees one. If I go, something happened to the UI. It's funny. If I run this query, there should be 300,000 rows that got returned. Okay, but Workbench would actually allow us. Normally, I would set it to 1,000, and the default is 1,000. And if I run it, it will just give me 1,000. It's rarely that you want everything, and 300,000 is nothing. It's tiny, right, compared to a real application which we have like millions and billions of rows. But in your code, the whole point of SQL is you're not really doing it in Workbench manually most of the time. The code is doing it. If you are in QA automation, the automation code is running queries. So it's not Workbench. So you have to have a way to limit it. So what you would do is you would add a limit keyword. So we're going to take this query. We're going to do employees, but at the end, I'm going to say limit, right? That's another keyword. And I can say 1 if I just want one row. There you go. It just gives me one row. If I say 5 and run it, now I only get 5 rows. If I look at it, there's only 5 rows and the result is here. So all we have to do is add limit in the number. And usually that goes all the way at the end of the query. It has to go at the end of the query. If we look at the city query, and we're going to do limit 10, we run the query, and there is 10 of them coming. Again, I'm doing command enter at the same time. Hold command and hit enter to execute, so I don't have to go back and forth to this thing. Okay, So you can limit it like that, and that is another keyword when we're reading. Now the next thing we're going to do, let's go to another video on work on it, is what if you want to have some conditions? What if you want to get cities that has a population of more than 1 million? What if you want to get cities that only have a population of 10, or a population under something, some kind of condition? When we're looking at the employees table, we have this column for gender, male and female, MNF. What if you just want to get rows of all female employees? What if you want to get rows of all male employees? You need to add a filter, right? You need to have some condition to say, hey, you have millions of rows. I want to get the rows that match this conditions. We need to be able to do that, and we use a keyword called where and we add that into our SQL. So on the next video, let's go ahead and actually learn how to do that. Okay. So this video is getting a little long, so let's break it up into smaller videos. All right. I'll see you on the next one. All right, so that was a good start for SQL, reading data, just the basics of select. There's a lot more that goes into select. You want to be filtering things, you want to ordering, sorting things. So there's a lot more. Make sure you follow the playlist. I'm going to put it in an order that makes sense, and make sure you subscribe and make sure you like this video, of course. And I'll see you on another video.